Hi everyone, my name is Darian. Welcome to a big, great event tonight because it's our 30th event, on data and design event. I'm Darian. I'm from Accurat Studio and also initialized on data design in 2018. So amazing, it's more than 7 years back. And the question back then was, who is also out there in the world doing something similar than we do? And that actually started the whole conversation. And today we are here with a lot of people watching and interested in this business. And speaking of, today's title is information design business. So we will talk about business models, and we will talk about things that designers normally don't speak that often, and that is, how do you do this? How do you manage to survive? What's the business behind? How do you pay your bills? So actually, normally what we always talk about is, oh, this is my new project. These are the nice stuff that I done. So actually, these are the things that designers show, but this time we will go behind the scene. That's why today I invited three friends with successful agencies who are doing this since then more than decade, 1 decade, but maybe even decades. So we will have tonight 1 hour with 3 talks with our speakers who will have 20 minutes to tell their stories, which is, I'm super curious to hear about them. And you will have during these talks possibility to ask questions on Slido. The link is below. And long story short, let me introduce my friends. So we have Gabriele Rossi from Accurat Studio. He's currently sitting in Brooklyn, in New York.
Hi.
We have, hi. And we have Benji from Interactive Things. He's now in Zurich. And we have, I'm just switched to community. Sorry, community is coming later. We have Christian. Christian is from
Hey,
Schema Design. And he's today streaming from Seattle. So, and you have seen them already just for a second. Now I'm bringing them in. We have open studios today also. Next door here in Basel, we have the people from Superdot with some guests sitting next door. Yes, that's our community. It seems that the weather got better than we thought, so it's not that crowded as it seems. And we have in Bolzano, we have Sheldon Studio. Yes, hi guys.
oh,
Cool.
hey,
So what we will do now is I would actually not even make much longer introductions. I'm looking forward for the discussion, and our first speaker is Christian. So, Christian, the stage is yours. We will disappear.
fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. Great to see everyone on the stream as well. Wow, big audience. So this was a little bit of a tough one to prepare, I'm not going to lie. but
Yeah.
and I think as Gabriel said, a little bit cathartic as well. And I think we found a good angle here. I'm excited to share some thoughts with you all. And then I think we'll have some Q&A afterwards as well. So
Yeah.
it would be great.
Looking forward, Christian.
Let
Would
me,
you
let me share my
share
screen.
screen? Cool.
Okay, perfect. Let me see. Do you have it up?
Yes. Here we go.
Fantastic. Good. So yes, my name is Christian Marc Schmidt. I'm the founder and principal at Schema Design, and I'm actually half German and half American, if you couldn't tell by the name, which of course these days is a topic in and of itself. But I actually grew up near Hamburg and then later moved to the United States. And for the last, 13 years, I've been living here in Seattle. Coming to you from Seattle today, slightly bleary-eyed, but nonetheless. And so with this background, I really grew up with a very specific sense of design: precise, logical, minimal, and ideally no color. So before Schema, I spent some time at these three places, at IDEO, Pentagram, and Microsoft. And each place taught me something a little different about research in the case of IDEO, craft in the case of Pentagram. And at Microsoft, I learned a thing or two about product. But eventually, I wanted to take what I'd learned and really build something of my own. So I started Schema. It's been over 12 years now. And back in the day, I, believe it or not, didn't really set out to run a business. I think like many of us maybe going through this, at the time, I just wanted to do good work, and I wanted to do it on my own terms. But of course, it didn't quite turn out that way. Because as I found, if you want to keep doing the work that you love, you end up really having to build a business around it. And so that's really what I want to talk about today, where we've been over the last 12 plus years, what we've learned, and where we might be headed next. So let's dive in. How we've evolved. The only constant in this work, this may sound a little cliche, but the only constant is change. Really, that's what I found, that there's always new tools, new expectations, new ways of working. And so if you're running a business, you have to constantly be adapting, or you will get left behind. So at Schema, we've had to reinvent ourselves many times. And a lot of the time, it actually felt like we were sort of figuring it out as we went along. But of course, in hindsight, looking back, you then realize that maybe there was a pattern here. And I actually think that there were 5 moments, 5 inflection points really for us that really ended up shaping our trajectory and our work. So I wanted to talk about those now. The first is mainstreaming data. When I was in school, first at Parsons and then later at Yale, Edward Tufte was everywhere. And so back in this time, it was all about paring down, getting rid of anything unnecessary, just showing the data. And that mindset really did shape how I thought about design in those early days. And it actually guided me through school. But then came Hans Rosling and Gapminder in 2006 at TED. And suddenly, it seemed like data could be emotional, it could be persuasive, and it could tell a story. It could actually make you feel something. And that, to me, was a major inflection point. And it's, in my mind, really the moment that data visualization went mainstream. So around this time, I was actually at Pentagram back in those days, and I had started experimenting with data in more expressive ways. And Invisible Cities was actually one of my very first projects. It was actually a collaboration with the artist Lee J. Shah. And this is a project that visualized geocoded social data in real time. Tweets and Instagram photos basically mapped to a topography of the city. And so you had social activities streaming in real time. You also had the terrain changing, kind of warping over time based on data density. And so this project was really, I think, one of my very first attempts at designing interfaces where the visualization itself became the metaphor. And you'll maybe see that as a theme in some of the later work that I'm going to show. So then fast forward to 2012, when I started Schema. Big data was the buzzword of the time. And the default response really for most organizations was dashboards. Dashboards over and over. And actually people kept asking me back in those days, how are you different from Tableau? This is where we started, right? Having to answer that question time and time again. And of course, it was really the wrong question to ask because we weren't trying to compete with Tableau. We were building custom tools, right? Focused on, not on productivity, but really on knowledge creation. And these were tools that were built for specific audiences, specific data sets, specific data models. So having to address that question time and time again, it really made that distinction very clear in our minds and very core to our work. So exploration. And one of our first projects at Schema was Legislative Explorer, which visualizes how bills move through Congress. And this was, at the time, it was commissioned by the University of Washington. And it was a project that made a very complex process, right, the process of legislation, visible and explorable. It also reinforced our early belief at Schema that if you can create tools for data exploration, then these tools can really shape understanding. Over a decade later now, we're actually still maintaining this tool. And in fact, last year, we were approached by the client, John Wilkerson, professor at UW, who asked if we would bring it in-house. And so we did. We took it over, and we're continuing to maintain it now in somewhat tumultuous times. So then by the mid-2010s, the field started to shift once again. And this time it was shifting more towards explanation, towards storytelling. Clients wanted no longer dashboards, they now wanted narratives. And so we started seeing more scrollytelling, which, obviously long form data stories with an arc, with a narrative arc and an editorial point of view. We started seeing more and more of this kind of work. And so we ourselves also began doing more narrative work, which then pushed us to really think beyond tools, beyond charts and graphs, and more around storytelling, content strategy, writing, and narrative design. So here's a project from that era. This was done with Google, Alberto Cairo, and Axios in collaboration. And it's a project called Searching COVID-19 that visualizes how people searched for answers during the early months of the pandemic. And so here we organize search data by topic and by intent, how to versus what is queries. And so we were able to show for a succession of several months how public perception shifted from confusion in the early days to resignation and adaptation. So I think, for me, this project really made visible not just what people searched for, but why. And so it captured, I think, in a way, the zeitgeist of the time and what we were all experiencing, a kind of shared collective anxiety. And then around the pandemic, our work once again started to evolve, this time towards data experiences. And these were interfaces where content and data came together really in a unified way, in an integrated way. And so we started thinking more broadly about how structure and story could coexist, how exploration on the one hand could lead to insights, and then insights once again could invite deeper exploration. And so that shift for us really started to come into focus with some of the work that we did for Bloomberg at the time. And actually, since 2018, we've worked with Bloomberg on a series of data activations for the New Economy Forum. And so each year that we were brought in, we created large-scale visualizations for topics like climate change, global trade, inequality, and many others for this global conference. And so I really do think of these as data experiences. They were, in essence, integrated narratives, telling a story through visuals, and ultimately providing context for the event, but also on a more visceral level, really helping people connect with the issues that were being discussed. And that really brings me all the way up to the present day, to today. And I think we're right now at another inflection point. The next shift is happening right at this moment, and it's towards systems that will synthesize data and that will actually think with us. And of course, I'm talking about AI. And we think that with AI, first of all, our role as designers is changing. So we have to rethink what we do and how we work. But also there's an opportunity to really shape the interface between human and machine intelligence. And that's what we're focused on today. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But first, what have we learned? Schema has always been small, right? We've oscillated somewhere around 8 to maybe 16, 17 people. And that's worked for us. But like with any business, there's actually a natural pressure to grow. So I want to talk about that for a moment. This notion of growth in a creative practice, which is actually It's actually tricky. It's not easy. And that's because it's not really about size at the end of the day. It's about staying true to the work. So let's unpack that. In the early days of Schema, I didn't realize how soon I would have to start delegating. But the more work that we took on, and we grew organically, always, the more work that we took on, the more my focus shifted, right? From designing projects to ultimately designing the business. And that, in effect, meant designing systems. So I needed to delegate. And it's really around that time that I started learning, that I learned my first big lesson, which is every business leans towards growth. Every business leans towards growth. But growth doesn't just happen. It's shaped by external and internal pressures. Right, you've got clients on the one hand. Clients want scale, they want continuity. And ultimately, it's a form of risk mitigation that sort of puts the pressure on to grow. At the same time, your team also wants opportunities to grow in their craft, to grow in their careers. And so that too creates a certain pressure to scale up, to grow. And as long as you can ride that wave, things mostly do fall into place. But then, growth at the same time is, like I said, it's tricky. When I started Schema, everyone warned me scaling a services business is really hard. And they were right. It is hard. It often feels like you're fighting a battle on three fronts. There's projects, right? You're always working to bring in new projects, sometimes through competitive proposals, through, at times, existing relationships, as I'm sure we're all aware. But the reality is that it takes an ongoing effort, right? This is never over. You always have to keep the pipeline filled. And you need people. You need good people to do the work, which means finding the right people, hiring, mentoring, pairing the right people with the right projects. And many designers also, as I found, aren't initially trained to work with data. So you need to create a culture also that encourages learning, experimentation, and collaboration. And then assuming that you've got the projects and the people, you still need the ability to execute. We really learned this, I think, in some ways the hard way in the early days of Schema. And it's also, process is also never something that is over. You're always honing your process. You're always trying to find a balance between ensuring some degree of consistency, repeatability, but also not letting go of creative freedom and giving people enough flexibility to still work their ideas into the work. So balancing projects, people, and process, that's really what it takes to grow a creative business. And that's what makes it also so challenging. But there is one model that has guided how I think about our work and how I think about scaling a business like ours. And it's actually surprisingly simple. We make and we learn, and that's it. That's it. It's a loop. One feeds the other. And it's tempting to think about, especially in hindsight, to sort of think about your trajectory as a company as a linear path. But in reality, I think we all know this, it's not like that. It's cyclical, and it's iterative, and it's organic. And that's really what this model attempts to capture. It's a constant process of making and learning. The cycle starts by reframing the brief. You help clients see the real problem, not just the one they came with. It also involves collaboration, like we discussed a moment ago, building trust and structure so that people can work well together in teams, which is actually one of the hardest things to do. And it's driven by innovation, which I think is an important point as well. You always have to push yourself to innovate, not for its own sake, not for newness sake, but ultimately to achieve a better quality of work, which for me, and this is probably a whole nother talk, is ultimately comes back to simplicity. And then on the learn arc, it's about standardization, standardizing what works so it can be repeated, refined, and improved. Strategizing based on experience, right? So based on the projects and what we've learned, figuring out where we're headed as a company, and then finding out how we communicate that more broadly to our partners, to our clients, and to our team, so that the outside world doesn't define it for us. And that's it. That's the model: make, learn, repeat. And of course, this make-learn cycle doesn't lead to maybe explosive growth, but we're also not chasing scale the way that a startup might. But what it does build over time is perspective. And this is what I think of as really our true value as a design firm. We don't scale vertically, we stretch. We stretch across industries, across organizations, challenges, domains. And that is what lets us see patterns and what lets us connect the dots, and also help others maybe navigate what might be next. So let's talk about what's next. Like I said before, I think that we're entering a new phase. And that's due to AI and LLMs and diffusion models, and how they are changing the way that we ultimately engage with information and how we make sense of it. And so as information designers, I think that we have a role to play in this, a critical role, in fact, to shape the systems that help people think with data. And so we call these systems intelligent interfaces, which will empower exploration. They'll help people basically investigate complex questions and form hypotheses about the world. They'll guide analysis. They'll help people find relevant data, maybe in support of or challenging the hypothesis that they came in with. From there, insights can be formed through synthesis, data synthesized, maybe proposing possible answers to the initial questions. And then those insights are shared and disseminated. And so this is how knowledge expands. So we call this framework the figure eight. It's really derived more from the scientific process, and it reflects a lot of our thinking from over the years and how we've sort of approached our projects. But like I said, there's an opportunity here for a synergy between human and machine intelligence. The left side of the figure eight is really about the structure of information. So it's rooted in science and rational thought, and this is really the space for AI, where AI fits in. On the right-hand side is meaning, and this is ultimately about creativity, about context and human connection. So this is where we come in, turning data into stories, creating stories that resonate, that make sense to people, and that really connect. So we think that we need a new generation of tools that can help us make sense of our increasingly complex and data-driven world. Now, what might those interfaces look like? Over the last 2+ years, we've been thinking a lot about that, and through our client work, through our self-initiated work, we've started exploring this space, and even though it's early days, some patterns are starting to emerge. And so I wanted to conclude with 3 areas that I think hold real potential for us in this space. The first area is knowledge graphs. Many organizations are sitting on huge amounts of unstructured information. And now through AI, we can create knowledge graphs that can connect all this information and actually surface patterns and relationships and outliers. And they can actually end up turning a lot of this siloed content into a network of meaning that can make it easier for people to search, explore, and build on all of this data. The second area is what we've come to think about as adaptive landscapes, which are, we think of these really as generative interfaces for discovery. And they visualize basically a solution space of sorts, which is a dynamic terrain, a landscape that is constantly reshaped through user intent and also through AI. And so as people explore, the landscape changes and shifts to show new perspectives and connections. And it really gives form to complexity through a universal metaphor, a little like invisible cities that I shared a moment ago. And finally, spatial computing. I think this is going to be a big topic as well, and AI and AR are clearly on a collision course. This is still very much in the early days as well, but the result will be interfaces that will be embedded in the world around us. And this is where we think we're headed. Immersive, intelligent tools and interfaces that ultimately blend the physical and the digital, and that will really help us see our world and our data in entirely new ways. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Christian. I already have two sentences that taken. You said process is never over. Love it. And the second one, we are not chasing scale. Love it.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. Super. So I would just hand over to the next speaker. Thank you, Christian. The questions will come afterwards. Speaking of, for everyone, please, the one thing that you shouldn't forget, and that is to ask questions on Slido. Here is the big ugly QR code. You can scan it and just directly ask questions in Slido. I already see some interesting questions. Please do so, or the link is just below in the description text of YouTube. And now I am very happy to welcome Gabriele. And Gabriele will share with us his story and the backgrounds. Let's go. Here we go. Gabriele, it's your turn. You have to unmute. You have to unmute first. Yes.
Here I am.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. You're
It was
welcome.
really, really interesting, and I'm pleasantly surprised by how much also what Christian was saying like resonates with like what I was thinking. Of course, like we didn't talk much about what we would be sharing, but it's great to see that like at least, and I'm sure with Benji will be the same. We're facing the same challenges. Uh, from a, like I will probably talk about it from a different perspective because I'm one of the founders at Accurat, which started in 2011 in Milan, and then almost immediately moved to New York to open an office here. But like maybe compared to Christian's experience, I started Accurat sort of like already knowing that I wasn't going to be actively a designer anymore in the company. So I'm a designer by training, but I approached Accurat more from the perspective of like designing a studio. So I think it will be reflected in my presentation today. I'll talk a bit more about like high level how we shaped the business, not necessarily that much about like what we do and how we do it. Let's see if I can advance here. So what is Accurat? Who is Accurat? I won't share directly any project. It's not a portfolio talk, but you will see in the background some images that will give you a sense of the type of work that we do. And I will use the presentation today to take you through our story and share with you a couple of reflections on what we've been thinking recently, how we evolved. And it's very interesting that this conversation happens now because we're in a moment when we are really rethinking how we approach business, of course, driven by what's happening worldwide with technology and everything else. But it's a good moment for me to reflect on these things. So I'll take you through a bit of a history of the firm and present our point of view on the business of information design. We started, as I was saying, in 2011 in Milan and right away in New York, but we started primarily as a graphic design studio working with data visualization. So imagine a team just of people that are expert in like static representations of information, charts, infographics, visual narratives. What you're seeing here is one of our first projects, a collaboration with Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, where we visualize complex cultural and social phenomenon. And we had like a great opportunity to do whatever we wanted with the page. And that's how we started thinking about how to imagine new visual metaphors to present information, how to shape a more expressive way to represent data in a way. So there was a lot of work that was focused on visual composition, visual metaphors, rhythm, form, but it mostly happened on the static page and also with static data. So telling specific stories out of a finite data set, a story that we could analyze and tell, and that wasn't changing. So what happened, and it's of course very common in our work, is that in the next few years, we, of course, started to understand that this way to present information had its own limitations. Like the real potential is, of course, in providing people with an opportunity to play with information, to interact with it in a way. So we started sort of like without really noticing, like a shift, the first big shift in our firm when we started hiring people that would start coding visualization. So we started building interactive tools. And of course, initially, they were basically just like an interactive version of what we were already doing. So adding a new layer of interactivity to mostly static stories. And this grew over time, but it was the first time we felt like we were introducing not just a technical shift pivot, but more of a cultural one, because we started thinking about data in a different way. So like allowing people to form their own understanding of phenomena. And this led us basically to become a more hybrid type of company, where like we started as a graphic design company. We were evolving into a more hybrid model with designers, engineers. And ironically, even though we started primarily as a graphic design team, the years between 2016 to 2019 approximately saw an even more, even deeper shift in our business. Basically, we fully transformed into a company that was primarily building interactive tools for active exploration of data. And the audience started to change, the audience of our tools, and therefore our clients. So clients were not media outlets or like brands anymore. We started to work with complex organizations, from global corporations to public institutions, and in general, like group of experts that needed to make informed decisions in an increasingly data-rich environment. So we started working with real experts. So our client became, over time, someone who was like a researcher, an engineer, a scientist, an analyst, someone who had a deep knowledge of the subject matter and of the data. And we were helping them creating expert tools to navigate this complexity without simplifying it. So we sort of like became architects of like tools and platforms that were deeply integrated in our clients' workflows. So this was a big shift. It brought a lot of growth in our team and very rapidly became the bulk of our business, so that we kept the same approach we were using in our first very plain, simple explorations, but to a completely different audience. And this, of course, led to company growth. We know what happened in 2020. We got to 2020 with like our biggest revenues, biggest margin. The business had been growing steadily since 2011, and we got to 2020 when we were 35 people in our team with a plan to grow even further. And of course, when the pandemic hit, it was complex. The first few months, of course, brought their challenges economically. 2020 was the only year when we didn't grow our revenues and we didn't make any profit. But more than that, this sudden stop made us understand that we were growing in a direction that wasn't really, really working for us, because we started to feel some sort of like misalignment between what we were doing as a company and why we started the studio in the first place, because we were scaling, but we realized that we had become very fragile as a business model, because like I really relate with what Christian was saying earlier. Scaling a design business consultancy is very complex because you have multiple elements that you have to take care of, and the most natural approach is delegation. Of course, your most senior people become managers, they start to delegate, and we built sort of like a pyramid where our most senior people were spending a lot of time not being designers or engineers, and this created a fragility of the organization that we didn't realize until we were hit by the economical crisis. But even more, we felt the effect in the coming years, because on paper, like if you looked at our company, growth came back. 2021 was as good as 2019, and we kept growing at the same pace as before. But we were more and more realizing that we were growing a business that didn't feel right. There was a lot of infrastructure, a lot of added costs for activities that were not related to generating value for our clients, generating quality, and the whole reason we started our company. The most talented designers and engineers we had were not doing that anymore. And we could feel that this approach had a limit, and the growth that we were still seeing was probably like a tale of like due to inertia from previous years, except 2020. We sort of felt like that this growth had become like a goal in and of itself, which is not what we wanted to do. We had outgrown the shape that we imagined initially for the business. So we had to stop and think about it. And starting in 2023, we decided that things were not working. We needed something drastic in a way. We needed to find an opportunity to tear everything down, and start rebuilding. Rebuilding based on what we had learned over the past years about how we deliver quality, what's the value in our work. So we basically took the chance of like people moving on to different opportunities, to rethink how we train people, how we hire. And we started resetting everything. We started flattening our structure again, removing all senior roles that were not directly contributing to the value of the output. And we started to rethink how we organize team, how we lead by example, or like with the junior people. We started introducing this role that no one at Accurat should only manage. We completely removed all layers that separated the quality of the work from the client, and we started more actively to think how we could become more like nimble, inventive, expressive, which is what we had when we started in the beginning. Of course, it was a smaller team. Everyone was hands-on on the work, but the challenge, like the opportunity here, was to do it more than 10 years after, with the experience that we built over the years, with the maturity and the technical foundation as well, because in the past 11 years, 12 years, we had learned how to do things better. So the challenge we gave ourselves is like, how do we restart the company, keeping some of the core foundational principles that made us start the company in the first place, but how can we translate it to a more mature context? And this leads to basically now where we're down from 35 to 21 people, and of course a much more senior team, and growth from an economical perspective hasn't stopped, but the company has changed completely. So we're now in a situation where, like, of course, some of the work has been done, but we want to continue in this direction. Now we have a much more lean and flat structure with much more senior roles. So we let people grow inside the company, but without any dead weights in a way. So without burdening the most talented people with tasks that were not necessarily related to delivering quality. And this allows us now to move faster, go deeper, and like stay closer to the quality of our work. And ultimately, it seems so far it's paying off because this hasn't stopped the growth of the company. Our clients are just willing to pay more for the value that we're generating because we're starting to find again like a way to consistently deliver this value at every interaction. And we're trying in a way to reclaim the spirit, the identity that brought us together in the first place. And this also brought like a big change for us because, as you've seen, like we started with very expressive, communicative work. Then we slowly moved over like with our full weight towards like building functional tools. But we always had this like these two souls as part of like who we are. We got to early 2025 where like let's say late 24 where like 90% of our revenues were coming from technical functional work and just 10% from more expressive experience related work. That is mostly what people see from the outside because it's also the flashiest work, the most colorful, the one you can more easily share with the public. But the core of our business was more in the invisible part. So we decided to split these two souls to make sure that each of these two faces of the same coin could speak to different audiences with different languages. And we created Accurat and Accurat Studio, of course. Accurat is like basically represents this more functional aspect of our work, and Accurat Studio is more, in a way, close to what we set out to do when we started the company. So more design-driven work, output-focused experiences. The work we do with tech, more and more is becoming something that has a strong focus on process, on understanding complex systems within organizations and providing solutions that integrate within the processes that are already in place and that try to innovate, often at a very like invisible but impactful scale. So the work we do is often based on like deep learning from our clients who are often experts at what they do, the data they work with. So the work we do is characterized by integrating with their teams, their processes, their methodologies, and learning from them before proposing solutions. And it often only affects procedural components. Sometimes it also has a visual output, sometimes something that in a way it's similar to the previous work we were doing. Sometimes it's more related to how things work. On the other hand, the work that we do with Studio, of course, relates more with like building meaningful experiences of interaction with data that in a way use design as a means of communication to engage people and sort of like bring abstract information into the human realm. All these structural changes that characterize the evolution of services were made possible because we took the time to define and refine some basic principles over the years. And I think that what stayed the same over the years is how we approached problems, how we saw always data as an opportunity more than a constraint. And this led us to develop over the years a couple of like working thoughts that support what we're doing. The first of which is this concept that data is never neutral and is always personal, that we developed with this idea of like data humanism, sort of connecting data to its most humane qualities. And the second of which is what we're focusing more and more right now, which is recognizing that the value of our work is not necessarily in how we visualize data, but in how we internalize. And I always use the metaphor of the English translator that was a very important figure in businesses until a few years ago. If you wanted to do business internationally, you needed a translator. So you would delegate that part of your business to an external source. And I see our work sort of like similar to this. I think that people need to internalize this knowledge of like working relation with data and
Gabriele.
this fluency. Yes.
Sorry, I don't
Again.
know if you have seen me. Okay, we're
Yes.
do you have like, let's say, 1 minute
I got
going
it.
to wrap up? Okay, thanks.
I got it.
Sorry.
So I see sort of like this need for deeper understanding of the dynamics of data that will then not necessarily end up in generating roles that are connected to data visualization. Because I think ultimately that our profession as purely as visualizers of information will inevitably end. And we've seen like what can be done with AI tools. Christian talked about it. Our belief is that the output, the final output, the visual output will not matter that much anymore. And we have to shift the focus of our profession from making beautiful charts, making beautiful visualization, to more upstream strategic thinking. So not the downstream visuals. So, and this is because the craft of like execution is not rare anymore. And it will become more and more democratized in a way. So deciding what to say will become more important than deciding how you say it. And there's a very interesting quote that I got a couple of days ago from Carly Harris, that is, when execution becomes trivial, direction becomes essential. So we see this shift happening every day. And that's why on our side, what we're doing to tackle this challenge is to more and more productize everything we can and standardize our processes, especially related to building tools, because we don't think we will make a difference by building a unique visualization anymore. We will make the difference understanding the challenges and then applying something that can be easily made with technology, with expertise that is more and more diffused in a strategic way. So I don't have answers on how our industry will evolve, but I know that to survive, we will sort of have to remain very intentional about how we grow and what we focus on. So invest in intellectual value more than anything else. So how we think, how we frame problems. Continue to build our identity as like data native strategists more than people that are focused on a craft. And also what we learn with having a more senior and nimble team is to always stay adaptable, fast, and small, and make sure that you're open to embrace change. Thank you. I went a little over.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it was fascinating, and thank you for being so transparent.
Yeah.
And for sharing a new lean minimum management mantra. It's super cool. I'm looking forward for the discussion. For everyone, you can also, I'm just seeing that there are questions, but you can also use Slido to upvote questions. So if you think that something is quite important, something, please upvote. I'm collecting the questions. Yeah, and regarding time, I would say, Benji, let's bring you in. So here we go. And I'm going out. You're on mute.
Classic.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks, Christian, Marc, and Gabriele for the assist. Trying to wrap this up here. There are many commonalities, obviously, between our presentations as they are in the practices that we do. And I want to sort of like connect directly to a phrase that Christian, Marc already said, not focusing on scaling, and that's why my talk is titled "Sculpting, Not Scaling." I myself am an interaction designer with a focus on human data interaction. I studied at the Zurich University of the Arts in interaction design, and I'm the co-founder and the managing director of Interactive Things, a design and development studio that I've been building and leading since 15 years now. My presentation today is not a conclusive framework on how to scale an information design business. Instead, I'm trying to share experiences building interactive things, which is the only thing that I know. So I thought about looking at this three intertwined and fundamental aspects of our practice. That is the purpose, that is the craft, and that is the culture within our team. And it's important for me to first acknowledge that even though I'm the one presenting today, but these values, these principles, these approaches have been developed by our entire team of past and present employees. So let me first start with a snippet out of our purpose statement that I value a lot. Our studio is a place to think, create, and learn, a space where we come together and collaborate with people we like and respect, for people we want to serve, towards a future we want to see become a reality. And even before we started Interactive Things, we were always fascinated by these interdisciplinary design studios and ateliers, such as the Ray and Charles Eames studio. IDEO has been mentioned before, or Frog, but also from the computer labs where theory and practice merge, such as the Xerox PARC or the MIT Media Lab. We were inspired by computational and generative design, by the work of John Maeda, Ben Fry, Casey Rees, but also Zach Lieberman or Golan Levy in sort of like the mid-2000s, just as well as by more applied information design by the leading studios in these early days, such as Stamen, Pitch, Periscopic, Lost, Catalog Tree, or Berg. I met my co-founders while studying at the Zurich University of the Arts between 2005 and 2008, and we valued the collaboration both inside the university and outside. We collaborated on research studies, freelance projects, and open source software. And we dreamed up the vision of an independent studio solving real problems for real people, where design and technology go hand in hand and also stand on equal ground. So I love the sort of like metaphor of the two souls that Gabriele mentioned, and maybe in contrast to how they are approaching it, we to this day try to harmonize those two in the same body. A year after we graduated, we came back together and left our jobs and started Interactive Things, a design and development studio for human data interaction, with a mission to make data accessible, understandable, and actionable for everyone, which usually means that we, similar to what we've heard in the previous presentations, help organizations discover insights in data, make sense of these insights, and convey these insights to their audiences. Let's look briefly at the type of work that we do. Maybe contrary to other businesses, over the years, we have narrowed our focus of services. We provide our clients, despite growing in capacity and growing in competency. We always shaved away activities and deliverables that either we were not really well equipped to do, or that didn't add value to the solution to the problems that our clients came to us with. So we tried to, over and over again, focus more and more on the essence of what we need to do. And today we provide specialized services in research, strategy, design, and development that are necessary to build great data products. At Interactive Things, we have a set of 16 long-term value-based goals without a permanent state of done. So those are never achievable for us, but they help us coordinate, they help us to direct the actions. So they act in a way as our overarching vision and help us to define in which direction to move. And each year, everyone on our team reviews and rates these goals by importance and by the progress that we have made in the past year. Excellent work quality is consistently rated one of the most important ambitions for our team. Therefore, we constantly invest in refining how we collaborate internally with our clients and with our partners. As an example for this, last year, 2024, we worked a lot on a company-wide initiative to elevate the quality standard across all our projects, all our products, and all our teams. Now, quality assurance and quality control, as you might guess, might not sound like the most exciting aspects to work on, especially if there's so much hype around AR, VR, XR, AI, ML, LLM, and all the other acronyms. It felt almost quaint to spend an entire year focusing on such a simple matter as the quality of our work. During this initiative, we filled gaps in our understanding and definition of what quality is, and we developed guidelines and processes to help our team achieve this level of quality. And such gaps are kind of okay to have if you're 3 or 5 people, because knowledge is shared much more easily, and it's much easier to quickly pull somebody in and help push something forward. But consistency, as we have also heard in the previous presentations, becomes much harder to maintain with a team of 10 or 20 people, let alone 35 or 50 or 100. But I can speak to that. We are 22 people, and so these are the problems that we already see. Quickly looking at who our clients are. So most of our clients are working in the fields of public service, humanitarianism, technology, finance, media, and academia. We consciously cultivate a select portfolio of sort of long-lasting and impactful partnerships. We choose our clients that are aligned with our values and our ethics, and prioritizing organizations with a positive impact on our society and environment. And from the beginning, we actively positioned ourselves on the international stage. Being from Switzerland, in Zurich, we have a fairly small geographical context, so reaching clients beyond our borders was important to us. And this also opened us to opportunities to work with exciting organizations worldwide. And similarly to the type of work that we do, we have learned which types of clients are the best fit for us. And we have actively shaped our processes to best serve them. For us, specifically, these are data owners in municipal, regional, and national governments, international and multilateral organizations, and established technology companies with a strong sense of societal responsibility. But knowing who you best work for also means that we learned which types of organizations we are not the right fit for. And we take that as one of the considerations when we decide on accepting or declining project inquiries. And also similar to our client portfolio, we also cultivate a select portfolio of products that we develop. For us, we have learned that we prefer long-term, last product development that provides long-term value to our clients and their users. And this approach has obvious benefits in the form of you have a continuous engagement with a client, resulting in steady revenue. But with this ambition also comes an additional responsibility for proactive product stewardship and sustainable product maintenance. Knowing both sides, the at times strenuous long-term product development, and then on the other side, the exciting short-term projects, there are upsides and downsides to both of these approaches without a clear right or wrong. So I can just speak for ourselves, and for us, the first, the long-term, the lasting, the sustainable, is more fitting and more rewarding for our business. And here are a few sort of like milestones that just had a big impact on our business and our growth. The first project was Ville Vivante for the city of Geneva back in 2012, which was our first governmental commission, and it resulted in a sort of like mix between a digital product and a public exhibition. The second one, Fukushima for the Neue Zürcher Zeitung in 2013, the time of the data explanation, as Christian Marc mentioned it, was our first long-form data journalism piece, which then resulted in a long-term collaboration with the newspaper to build up their internal processes and capacity. The third, Education Inequalities for UNESCO, also in 2013, was our first big data platform for humanitarian data. And this is also a product that we are, since that day, are continually operating, maintaining, and further developing. So it's a little bit over 10 years now. Then the fourth is Wellbeing in Germany for the German Chancellor's Office back in 2016, was our first big foreign government collaboration. The Going Digital Toolkit for the OECD back in 2019 was our first collaboration with OECD, an organization that has done stellar data visualization pieces before, most notably the Better Life Index by Maurice Stefaner. And it sparked a series of further collaborations with the organization. And then most recently, the COVID-19 dashboard for the Swiss Federal Office for Public Health in 2020, and over the course of the following years of the pandemic, has for us definitely been the most significant contribution to public life in Switzerland, and again, inspired a series of specialized applications of a similar kind for other federal offices. But besides our client commissions, we invest time in our own innovation. We collaborate with universities and institutes and labs to conduct research or help them conduct the research. We have our own practice of self-initiated experiments to explore interesting topics or just recharge creatively. We build, like some of those experiments turn into products, Catalog, an open source platform for documenting UI systems, Prisma, a chart generator, and Swiss Maps. Those are all open source software that we maintain and provide to the community. And we have always been and continue to be sort of like engaged with publications, either contributing to books or releasing our own publications. One of the examples is the Substratum series, where Gabriele's co-founder, Giorgia Lupi, had an interview in. And then we organize communities. Back in the day, we were part of the initial days of the Open Data Association here in Switzerland. Then we started Hacks Hackers in Zurich. And these days we're organizing the Data Visualization Zurich meetup. And if we can, we also try our best at teaching and mentoring students or young professionals, either at universities or outside of the university. To do this innovation and also to provide perspective for our team, we provide them with a innovation stipend. So that's either time or money that they can use to pursue self-directed research development. It's sort of like a yearly budget that they can have and that they spend in whatever is most interesting to them. And very similarly, we also offer an education stipend. So if they don't just want to explore themselves, but if they want either continue with education, training courses, or conference attendances, then we provide the time and money to do so. And I think that brings me to sort of like the culture, because yeah, we've also heard today working as a team is one of the hardest things that you will have to learn, building and sculpting a business. We started out in a small room, just big enough to fit 5 desks in a quiet residential area in Zurich. And over the first 3 years, we added additional rooms that helped us to build up the capacity to around 8 people. And back in 2014, it was time for us to move into a bigger space. Our next studio, close to the lake of Zurich, now offered us space for up to 12 people. And at that time, we started to feel the need for more structure and oversight. And that was also the time where we introduced my role as managing director, stepping away from the technical design and development work that I was doing for our clients and taking on the role of the business, or as Christian Marc said, the designing of the business. And then in 2017, again, it was time to move into yet a bigger space. And we moved into our current office where I'm sitting right now in the heart of Kreis 4 in Zurich. And over the years, even more structure became necessary. And so my partners moved as well into leadership roles as design lead, as technology lead, and as operations lead. As you see here in this chart, over the past few years, we experienced substantial growth to currently 22 people. But you also see that the y-axis of this chart is capped at 20. And we consider for ourselves, for our company setup and for our business, around 20 people to be the right size. It allows us to build strong personal bonds and maintain the quality that we expect in all the work that we do. We have always restricted ourselves to only hiring when we are confident that we can provide sustainable long-term employment. We felt that as our responsibility as the employer, that employees are not here for just a single project or just a temporary need for additional capacity. We always wanted for them to have both a long-term place and a career trajectory that is interesting to them. So, and I think this might be one of the most important learnings for me that I would love to share with the others is to scale only after you've built a larger, more robust foundation than you currently need. And by foundation here, I mean foundation in the sense of business fundamentals. So have a stronger strategy, a more robust business operation, well-functioning sales and finances that allow you to bring new people in onto that foundation that is stable enough to hold them. So today we're 22 employees with 2 rotating internship positions per year. Our team members come from 12 different countries, speaking 9 different mother tongues. So for us, it was important both to open up to international clients as well as to international talent. So we settled on English as our studio language already back in 2012 when we hired our second permanent employee, Piotr. And fun fact, our first permanent employee, Jan, he's still with us today. So that's 13 years for him now. together with others like Tanya, Julia, Gerhard, and Tom, who have surpassed a decade with us now. So prioritizing personal growth for our employees and well-being and equal support across disciplines has always been important to us. That's why we want to have a clearly defined career system and a transparent salary system so that people know what we as the owners earn and that they know what they can expect to earn. And you might remember that I said our vision was a studio where design and technology stand on equal ground. And that also means with our salaries. So all our disciplines, design, development, and management, all earn equal pay, equal salaries. I would like to wrap up with a few insights into sort of like our traditions and our routines. We have weekly showtimes, which are short presentations of project work or new findings or improvement initiatives. Then our discipline sub-teams have weekly knowledge time or technical weeklies where they advancing their craft. We have adventure time once a quarter where we go out and experience something outside of work together. The current photo there is from our recent excursion to CERN in Geneva. We have a quarterly team forum where we discuss the sensitive, personal, and emotional topics outside of our technical work. These are conversations usually about how we relate to each other, working as humans in our organization. Once a year, we have a internal hackathon. Probably doesn't need any explanation. And then also once a year, we have an annual team-wide retreat where we collectively reflect upon where we stand as an organization and where we're heading and make the necessary readjustments, inviting everybody to contribute to the strategy of our company. And all of these formats, they have manifested and evolved over time whenever we felt the need for a dedicated space to align ourselves. And this brings me to my final thought for current and future leaders, but also for everybody who wants to make a difference in their organization. This thought is based on the belief that organizations are more than the founders, more than the CEOs, more than the sums of their parts. Organizations have emerging purposes, desires, and ambitions. And so the best that we can do to achieve our goals aligned with these emerging qualities of our organizations is to listen and respond to what the organization needs and wants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benji. Super cool. Amazing. Actually, we are a little bit late in time, but doing actually from the other side, good that we have so many, so many questions. I don't know. Actually, I think there is one phenomenon that somehow it seems either the speakers who are chosen today are super reflecting over everything they do and kind of trying always to improve the process and always rethinking it. We do the same. So I would even guess that somehow the business we all in is somehow that we all want to have good social impact, want to do good things, meaningful things, and actually that brings us to always rethink and reflect on everything. So super nice. Just before we start, for the people who need to leave or something, so thanks. If you enjoyed it, just that's one last thing. Kind of, we are always happy if you share the spirit or kind of like the video or something, or add comments in the videos and so on. So it helps a lot. Yeah, and then we would now start with very interesting discussion. I tried somehow to summarize the questions into clusters because there are so many. So let's start. Would you like to start with so the good part is I can actually, each question can be kind of, each of you could answer that question. So that's actually good. So we will have a group discussion. Would you like to start with a funny one or like a less funny one?
It's the fun, come on.
Okay, the fun.
Let's
okay, so I think the funny question is actually that people who ask like regarding scaling say, is it important, because somehow there seems to be a pattern, is it important to be based in a big city? Or kind of, what do you think? What are the good cities and the places to be and to find projects? Or is that not a funny one?
I'll let Gabriel go first.
Okay.
I mean, over the years, I thought many things about this. I would say we started the company in Milan, and people had no idea what we were setting out to do in Italy in 2011. It was really, really hard to explain people like why what we were doing mattered. Then we came to New York just for like short experience, and we got amazing clients here in New York because the market here was more ready for this type of things.
Yeah.
But most of all because we found people like peers that helped us, that connected us to a community, and the same people that Andrew was mentioning at the beginning. Like we met all of those people because we came to New York, because they were hanging out here. If they were not living here, something brought them here every once in a while. And this, like, we wouldn't be here as a company if we didn't make that move, because like being in the right place at the right moment is ultimately, I think, 90% of the reason why I have a company at the moment, why we succeeded. Because if we stayed in Milan, probably after 2 or 3 years, we would have said like, let's pivot to something different. So there is like still, like in this world, I think it's important to be where things happen. It doesn't have to be always. Like you can travel, you can you don't have to be present here. Now we have like 60% of our revenues come from the United States, and I'm the only one of the company that is based here. All of our team is in Milan, and it works. But like sometimes there is a need to meet people, and also for like not necessarily related to like getting work, but learning a profession. Of course, there is a tension, especially like since COVID, between like remote work, presence. Of course, like both make sense. I think in different times in your career, you always have to be like flexible to adapt to like being with people physically, people that can teach you a profession, like sitting side by side with them has a value. At the same time, having uninterrupted work in an environment that you can control also has a value, especially for people that have a family and that need to find a healthy balance between work and life. So I think places matter,
Yeah.
but are not a dogma.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if places, if you believe that places also matter for getting the work, right, for getting the projects. I think you sort of addressed that. Yeah, it's a very deep question. I think there's a lot to say on this. I actually, over the majority of the time that I've had Schema, I've been thinking, should we not be in Seattle? Should we be in New York? Should we be somewhere else? I think these thoughts just sort of naturally come up, and I spent a lot of time living in New York before coming out here, so sort of had that point of reference. I don't know. I don't think you have to be in a big city. Actually, it's sort of my takeaway. And now we actually have a team in New York as well, and that's been great. I think going into that, I think a lot of what sort of motivated that decision was being closer to our clients. Being able to sort of tap into the the New York design network, which obviously is much bigger than Seattle. But if I sort of look back now on the last, it's been I think 4 years now. We're sort of kind of where we were. I think it hasn't made that big a difference. Only in the sense that we have a bigger team. We have, and now we also have more Zoom meetings as well between the two offices. But no, I think it can have benefits for sure. I think as someone who lived in New York for over 10 years, I think especially as a young designer, you want to be in a place where there's a lot of activity, where you can meet others and get inspired by the different studios and what they're doing. I think that certainly helped me when I was a young designer. But I also think that Seattle and smaller cities, I think, have a real advantage as well, which is that you can be a little more insulated, perhaps, and I think it affords you time to reflect, perhaps, to think, and to really build up something unique as well. Not that you couldn't do that elsewhere, but I think there are some advantages actually to being in a smaller location. So yeah, I guess that's how I would. And
Cool.
Gabriel, I agree with your point on hybrid. I mean, I think that's a whole nother topic, which we can get into more. But lots of thoughts on that. I generally agree with what you said, though. I think both are remote and in person are important.
Cool. Benji, do you want to say something to this question?
The one thought is,
Yeah.
if you are in a smaller city, you can also invest in that city. I think that's something that we did a lot, is, again, the things that I mentioned, like the Open Data Association, the Hex Hackers meetup, the exchange with universities. That all takes time. That is not paid, but it does pay off. So stimulating that community, nurturing those relationships, I think is really important. So, yep, it's just sweat equity, as we say. Like, you just have to invest that time, and if you are bound somehow by the location and you can't go to, the design central, then invest in that city and sort of build up more culture there.
Cool. That actually is the perfect bridge to the second question, which is, by the way, the most upvoted question regarding projects and how do you get projects? Do they come to you? Kind of, is your website so powerful and your portfolio so powerful that they come all to you? Or do you choose clients, people, and how does it work today that you're kind of a successful agency, and how did it start? Yeah.
Another $1 million question.
Okay, you don't have to be completely transparent
if anyone
on this.
has answers, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. You don't have to be fully transparent if it's a weak point or something. Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
You go. You start.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess I think as we've grown over the years and as we've built more of a reputation, I think it's now a lot more common than it was in the early days for people to come to us, through having seen our work. Maybe they reach out through the website, or maybe they're reaching out through contacts as well. I will definitely say in the early days, and we grew organically, I think, like all of us here. In the early days, it was much more of a hustle, for sure, and I think it helped me back in the early days of Schema to have a really deep network, actually, from previous places I'd worked. From having actually worked at Pentagram and IDEO, and then in particular Microsoft, actually, which was for me the reason that I ended up moving to the West Coast. And so I think, at the end of the day, and I'm definitely not the first or the last to say this, but it is all about relationships. And I think the best thing you can do if you want to start your own business, your own information design business, is to really cultivate your networks, right? I mean, everybody will say this, and it's really true. So for me, I would say in particular the people that I met at Microsoft and other places I've worked, that helped give me the start in the early days. And then, yeah, like I said, over the years, the reputation grew, and now people will reach out to us. And yeah, that's pretty much how it works. We do participate in RFPs as well, with varying success rates. I think like a lot of people would maybe agree, but at the end of the day, it's relationships, and I think that's maybe the one big takeaway for me.
Maybe for the people who don't know, RFP is a request for proposal process that's usually done as part of public procurement, where there's a brief, and then as many as want can apply with a proposal for that project. Yeah, I strongly agree with what Marc says regarding the relationship part. maybe the one anecdote that I can share that, like from our very early days, was same through network came inquiries very early on, and within the span of our first months, we had our first big disappointment after having spent hours talking to a potential client and believing that we have a project, just for that project to disappear into nothing. And a few days later, while we were also talking to another client, like that project succeeded. And there's not always rhyme or reason to these decisions. So the big learning is a project is a project once that contract is signed and not before. So make sure it's in writing. I think that would be my biggest point in getting that first client.
I mean, of course, I agree with everything. I would add like another perspective that is like, for us, this thing has been like a blessing and a curse. Like the fact that we still mostly get work through two channels, like public visibility of our work and word of mouth. These are like the two main sources. But as I was saying like earlier, we make like now it's slightly changing, but we're used to making 90% of our revenues from work that we can't really publish. It's not public. And so like our visibility attracts work that we're not necessarily interested in, because the type of visible public work that we want to do it because we want to experiment. We want to do new things, not necessarily because we want to work for a client on that type of work, while the type of work we seek is something that is hardly advertised, or it's so niche, so unique that even if you advertise it, it's very hard to convey in a way that would actually attract clients. So basically, as Christian was saying, like relationships, word of mouth, people that have worked with us move on to different companies, meet other people, talk about how it was to collaborate with us. And the sentence I hear the most is always like, "Oh, I thought you were doing different things. I didn't know you were doing this. I thought you were making infographics. I thought you were doing like websites." And then like we work with someone who discovers how it is to work with us, and that's usually our biggest channel, which is a blessing and a curse, because we've been blessed by having like a lot of work over the past few years, but at the same time, it's hard to predict. It's hard to control. If you want to scale, or like if you're in a rut, you need you need a little boost. You don't know which buttons to push, because it's not like I'll pay for more advertising, I'll get more work. You can call someone in your network, but usually it's a long-term return activity. So now we're trying to be more active and more proactive in selling work. But what we have discovered, of course, it's like you do it not by talking about what you do, but by talking about the challenges that clients face and providing a solution to that challenge. Going around saying, maybe you need a dashboard, maybe you need a tool. It's not a good way to sell. You have to understand an industry, understand the need, understand the pain points, and provide a solution for those pain points, instead of like advertising your past work that most of the times doesn't align perfectly with what the client potential needs are. So we haven't solved it. We haven't cracked it.
Gabriel, I was going to jump in and basically say a similar thing, that I think there's another dimension to this, which is the more proactive way that projects happen, right? That they materialize, which I would just agree with what you said. We find ourselves increasingly actually in that position as well, working with existing relationships, clients that we've worked with for years, in some cases, to really partner with them on figuring out what challenges do they face, and ultimately where could we add value. And so I think it's important to be cognizant of, first of all, what value can you offer as a firm, and then what problems do people face that you could help them figure out, that you could help them solve. So I think that actually is a very, very important point as well.
it often happens that the best projects we have, like we work on, are with clients that were not working for a company like us to solve that problem. They were looking in a completely different direction. Then, for some reasons, someone, maybe someone they knew or someone in their team, had the intuition that that problem could be solved with what we could offer, and the the match was made, and we solved the problem. But we usually compete with organizations that look completely different from us. Sometimes we compete with Accenture, like most of the times with like consulting firms, sometimes with IT companies, sometimes with agencies, not really that much with agencies, but like with companies that on paper do a completely different type of work than what we do. We just solve the same problem in a very different way. So it's hard to be proactive.
So there is a lot of what I hear. It's still educational work for people to understand what we do, right? And yeah, what I take also what you said is that very hard to predict. And on the other hand, what you said also, which is I think also very true, is actually you seek already for kind of challenges and potentials where the project could come in for a potential client with already suggestions, which is super good for the client. So you just go there and say, "Hey, I have an idea." So yeah, cool. Let me just maybe jump to a second thing which has been visible in your presentations, is that that you invest and engage a lot into kind of internal further development, self-initiated projects, process optimization, and so on. So Benji was talking about yearly budget that people would have to invest, right? So a little bit, maybe if you could share something about kind of how do you balance this kind of internal investment side towards the external client budget side.
Yeah, I can start with that because sort of like this, what we call the innovation stipend is a rather new thing. I think we have it for 2 years now, and it came out of the need to formalize it. As with other things, when you're 3 people, you know, you have a little bit of time, you spend it on something that you enjoy doing. It's very easygoing, it's very informal. Once you grow, once new people join that might not have this tribal knowledge, that might not have this background experience and have seen people do this, they need guidance. And so, yeah, you need to provide them with, you know, when, for how long, on what topics, what is an expected outcomes, all these things, at least in our case, had to be formalized. That doesn't mean that, you know, if somebody has a different idea of how they would like to approach it, you know, it's excluded, but that just means it gives a sort of like basic framework. And we have seen that it reduces a lot of the anxiety of like, am I doing something useful for the company? Is this valuable to the company? Am I wasting time? Am I wasting money? And instead it gives them the confidence that, hey, there's buy-in from the company, it's sponsored, it's we make room for it in our planning. I have the right to demand that time, and that has helped us to reduce some of these dynamics that might not be as visible if you're not really tuned in with all of your employees, and especially again if you grow and the proximity might not be as close as it is when you're a few people. Definitely has helped.
I was actually curious how you guys handled that, because we also place a lot of emphasis as well on research, but in practice, it's actually quite hard to make space for in the everyday of running a studio. So I love actually what you guys are doing. Might take some notes as well, but I think we've often struggled with this actually, because you're ultimately competing with the everyday priorities and deadlines. And as we know, the work is, it's sort of lumpy. I think there are times when it's not so busy, and then somehow all the deadlines always converge around the same time. So people get busy, but I think in some ways maybe the art is to kind of find those moments when things are a little bit less less hectic, and use that for research, for internal exploration. But I would agree that it's important, and especially over the last 2 years, as we've seen the space of AI really blow up, it's sort of become increasingly important for us to think about, well, what, like I was saying in the talk, what's our role as designers, as technologists in this space, and not having the time to do some more self-initiated work to kind of reflect on these themes, and also do some early prototyping. Not having that, I think, would really be to our detriment, at this point. So, but yeah, it's a tough thing. I'm not going to lie. I think we're always balancing, the actual billable work with the non-billable internal research. So,
Of course, I agree with everything you both said. It's very hard. Like consultancy is not shaped like a product company, so it's very hard to keep the same level of focus when on one side you have a client and on the other side you are the client. And we've always struggled with it. What we're trying to do as much as possible is to always have a client. So even for research projects, we make up a client. So we apply for a grant. Maybe it gives us a little bit of money, but then we market that thing, like we give it to a client so that we have someone that can force the timeline, that can give us a feedback. Sometimes we do it for like pro bono work, but I think the way we found is always to have a client on the other side that can help you put the same focus you have on paid projects on stuff that you do for research, so that it doesn't get left behind. So if you have a deadline, no matter if you're getting paid or not, you have to meet that deadline. And it's not an artificial deadline that you set internally. You said like, oh, it would be great to have that research project by the end of April. It's never going to get done if you have clients screaming in your email on the other side. So we look for screaming clients even on research projects, because it's the only way we found so far. And now, as I was saying, like we're trying to productize a lot of what we're doing. So standardize as much as possible the interfaces, the frameworks, because we think we will need to have ready-made solutions, and we do it within projects. So sometimes maybe the budget would allow to do the project in a certain way. We decide to invest more so that we could build it that way. We could build it that way so that it would give us something that we can use potentially on other projects. So we force the requirements, sometimes overworking on a project, so that we can bake the research into that project.
if I can actually jump in on that real quick, because I think I was thinking along the same lines too, and what we often think that there's sort of a thin line between self-initiated work and product. And so I think one question is like, where do you draw the line between those two? Between research, let's say, experimentation, and projects that could actually turn into products. And I'm curious, actually, maybe for both of you, I'd be curious to hear how, and I'm not sure if interactive things, it sounds like you guys do this as well, but finding that balance, how do you do it? And, I actually think of, and we have some experience with product as well, but I think of service and product as being two very different businesses at the end of the day. And so while I would say we've dabbled in product, we ultimately always gravitated back towards sort of the core business, which is services, because we found that they were just sort of inherently different. But I'd be curious, to hear maybe from both of you how you manage that tension.
I'll let you start then.
So our innovation framework basically consider this evolution. So it starts out with experimentation. So kind of like little constraints and again at their own like at our employees' own time. And once it gets fancy term, so like escape velocity, like once we realize there's something there of interest, maybe we want to turn it into an open source, like a piece of open source software. Maybe it becomes sort of like a little service, like a website that people could use. Then we decide as a business, how much should we invest in this? Like, and that's money pretty much, right? Like you can boil it down to how much time do we want to invest in it? What do we see with it? What value does it add to our business? And once it gets to that shape, then it's usually government, company funded, and we treat it as such. Now, when you said sort of like differentiate between, dabbled in product and going back to services, I think with a lot of the work that we do, especially for the government, we experience a lot that we have to take over some of the responsibilities that a typical product owner or product manager would do, just based on the experience that might be there, the attention, the competency that might be there. So or some of the products that we're building for like 5-6 years, I would consider that the work that we do as a project team on that product is pretty much product work. It's almost like, dedicated team for that product, understands the problem space really well, understands the audience, the users, the stakeholders. But that doesn't mean that, we sell that product at the end, or it's a product that people have a subscription for, but it is a product for our client. Client still is the product owner, but we call this product stewardship. Like we take care of that product for our clients. They're the sole beneficiary of it, and we're sort of like the long-term team that builds it for them.
Yeah, and find myself a lot in what Dan just said. Ultimately, all the services we sell are products in a way. It's just that we're paid as a consultant, but what we do is like we build a product. So often it happens like I'd say 90% of our clients are either like an innovation team of a large corporation or a startup that needs to build a product from the ground up, and we design it and build it and take it to like MVP, beta, and then they take over and it becomes their product. But we're paid as consultants, so it's easy to set a timeline, set the budget, and work because we have this client on the other side. We define, at least for how I was describing it, product as the stuff that we build for ourselves. But ultimately, it's not necessarily going to be something that will be sold as a self-service digital product, but it's mostly like some framework or something that we can use as a starting point to deliver other products for that someone else will own. So for us, like the difference is always like there's a client or there isn't a client, and what we call product is like something that we will own, some components that will own and that will help us also, like connecting to the previous questions, like also help us selling, because of course if you want to be proactive, it's very hard to say like I'm an expert in all these things, maybe I can do something for you, while it's much easier to say I have this product, it solves this problem, you can buy it as it is, we will adapt it for you, 90% is there, you just need the 10% to adapt it to your specific situation. But look at it, it's working, it solves a problem. It's much easier to sell that than to sell the vague idea that maybe after 6 months you will have something that we don't know how it looks like, but it will probably solve a problem, but in a completely different way from how you are looking at it at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So always have a client, basically, is what I'm taking away from this, which makes a lot of sense. I know we want to move on. But,
super.
I think just one last thought is that maintenance is always tricky. I think because if I look back at sort of products that we've created, that we've started, there's a graveyard of of things that were started but not maintained after a certain point. So anyway, probably a topic for
No,
For
another
no.
itself.
conversation.
We always
Yeah.
tell clients that like the best help we can give them is to help them hire the people that will maintain what we're building,
Uh,
because
Yep.
otherwise like it often happens that like you build something that they don't have the expertise in-house to maintaining it. It doesn't make economical sense for them to keep paying us to maintain it. But if it's something they want to invest on, we often offer this as part of our project scoping, like helping them training or hiring the people that will eventually take over and take ownership of what we're building. Or maybe they will build it with us together so that they know the product.
cool.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'm just asking regarding time because we have 50 minutes over time. Should we make a last short question and then finish? Yeah, a last one. Cool. The last question, I think that goes into the question of hiring. What Gabriele just before said, the word hiring. People are always asking, okay, what are you looking for? How do you get the talent? I think these questions are too complicated, but I take one out of these top cluster of topics regarding hiring, HR. How do you onboard people? How do you give them the skills? Do you have an academy? And so on and so on. But shortening it to a last short question, which is, what are the 3 skills that you would look in a junior designer joining your team? That can be short. 3 things.
Who goes first?
Nobody.
I'll say
I can give you one. Oh, go ahead.
Definitely being able to improvise and to forget everything and learn something different. Like it's usually like it's never about what you have learned up to that point. Is how much you can show that you can learn new things, because whatever technical knowledge, industry specific expertise you have at the moment of hiring will not stay the same, can't stay the same, will have to evolve. So often like a good indicator of if a person will be happy and will succeed with us is like how many things they've done in their lives. It's like if they're like an electronic musician, but also they hike, but also they fix bikes, and they studied physics for 2 years, then left because they wanted to become a professional swimmer. Like all these things, like show curiosity, uh, ability to adapt,
Adapt.
and ultimately it's what pays off.
Curiosity is big. Yeah, I would agree. I was thinking three three attributes. I can definitely give you 2. I think
Okay. One is also good.
one is okay. I think, I mean, obviously there's a certain level of technical skill, right, that we look for in a portfolio when it comes to hiring a designer, let's say, or a technologist, creative technologist. So, and we could talk about that as well, but I think if we sort of assume a given level, let's say, of technical ability for a junior candidate, I think the other 2 things that I would probably cite are the first is drive, or grit, or perseverance, which is obviously a very hard thing to screen for. So, but I think it's such an important attribute to have. So yeah, hard to screen for, but you can usually tell. I think it takes a lot of it takes conversations essentially to sort of get at that element. And I think the second thing I would cite is very closely linked to that, and that is perspective, which also was part of my earlier slide presentation. But it's really more about a voice, right? A specific, I guess a voice or a perspective that reflects in the work itself, which is surprisingly hard to come by. So the advice I would give to any young designer or technologist is really try to find your voice. What do you stand for? What does your work stand for? What are your aspirations as a creative professional? And have that come through the work and also the way that you present your work. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of frankly cookie cutter portfolios out there, and we see a lot of those, and that's ultimately not really, from a company perspective, the thing that's most in our interest is to have a diverse team of people who are driven, who are motivated, who also have their own sort of internal agendas, if you will, right, for what it is that they want to achieve. And then the work ultimately happens through the negotiation, right, of us working together as a team and working through these issues. So yeah, I think that's it. It's drive, it's perspective, and then of course, technical ability as well.
Cool. Benji?
All right. We actually have exactly 3 things that we communicate or that we ask for on our website for applicants. The first one ties into what people have already said. It's an exploratory mindset. So being curious about learning. People who come with an attitude of, I'm an expert and I know everything, are usually not a good fit at interactive things. The second one is thematic interest. You need to be interested in the product that you're building and the people that you're building these products for. Coming in with an attitude of, I love design or I love engineering and that's all I want to focus on, and I don't care what those metrics mean or what's behind that data. It's also usually not a good fit. Like having curiosity, having an interest in what is it that I'm showing, to understand why I'm showing it. And the third one is you got to be interested in team collaboration. You got to be sort of like interested in sparring with others from your own discipline, from other disciplines, from external experts. You got to have, even you might have sort of like, you might not be the most extrovert, the most outgoing person who loves to collaborate with others, but you have to be interested in working together and seeing that what we can do as a group is usually much better than what one single person can do.
Cool. Thank you. What I take away is there is certainly a lot to discuss. And I'm very glad and thankful that there are 55 people who stayed until even now, who are still there. So super, thank you. Thank you everyone for your support. Thank you for the amazing talks, the speakers. Speakers, please stay here. I'm just now gonna turn off the live stream. So for everyone who joined, thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Bye, everyone.